The government's controversial budget overhaul hit the lower house today.
This is the first step in the most ambitious tax reform package for a quarter of a century.
The Treasurer insisted it's all about breaking down systemic inequality.
It will help ensure that aspiration and opportunity are the birthright of every Australian and not just some.
And fixing a housing crisis decades in the making.
Following the policy mistakes made a quarter of a century ago, home ownership has been pushed further and further out of reach, and especially for young Australians. We hear a lot about helping people get on the property ladder, but there's no point having a ladder if the first few rungs are missing.
What these measures do is to enhance opportunity and aspiration rather than entrench privilege.
The government is increasingly confident it has the public's support to put the squeeze on property investors who've been blamed for pushing first home buyers out of the market. But that's not where the political fight is. Investors and business leaders increasingly are pushing the government to reconsider its planned tax hikes on business owners.
It is hard to get tax reform onto the agenda. It is hard to get decent reform onto the agenda.
One of the Parliament's most vocal advocates for a new tax system, Indepth Allegra Spender, today urged the government to hold a lower house inquiry into proposed capital gains tax reforms.
The answer, once you've made that decision, is not just to ram it through and hope for the best and hope that people get over their concerns.
A view echoed from several prominent voices inside Labor as well.
We're all about productivity, we're all about growing companies, we're all about boosting growth and jobs and the like. And so I think we do need to think about how some of these changes might affect them.
Our message to the Commonwealth Government is we do not want to disincentivise exploration in our mining industry, nor do we want to disincentivise foreign investment in our large-scale projects, which are essential for bringing these mega projects to life.
Well, here's a surprise. Roger Cook from Australia's petrostate comes out and says he wants tax concessions for the mining and fossil fuel industry.
The Treasury Secretary has also weighed into the debate, dismissing claims that higher taxes on capital gains will deter productive investment and that it's ultimately about plugging a fiscal hole.
Reforms on this scale have understandably generated considerable interest. In some instances, this may largely reflect the fact that individuals are sensitive about paying additional tax, which is totally understandable. But revenue needs to be raised from somewhere.
Every dollar across the forwards gained from those measures will be handed back to people through the increased income tax cuts, through the Working Australians tax offset and the $1,000 automatic tax deduction. So this is good tax reform.
The Australian people should have a choice between whether they sign up to the Labor Party plan of the biggest tax grab in history or our plan, the Liberal and Nationals Party's plan, to lower taxes.
The opposition tried to raise the stakes by challenging the government to put its tax hikes to the ultimate political test.
The question was very clear in asking why the Prime Minister hasn't got the guts to take his toxic taxes to an election.
There's this thing called the Constitution that the Nationals don't seem to understand either. We have elections every 3 years and there's got to be a period closer to that before the Governor-General will agree to an election. So it once again just shows their desperation, frankly.
There's little doubt the government will have the numbers in the Senate with the Greens to pass its tax changes. The intention is to legislate by early July, preceded by a 3-week Senate inquiry. The Prime Minister has left the door open to modest carve-outs from his planned capital gains tax changes.
People shouldn't expect big changes, but we will engage in good faith.
Options include expanding the definition of a small business so that more companies can qualify for an exemption. But ultimately, the government is not backing down.
We believe in this side that when you have the power to effect real change, you should do it. That you have a responsibility to deliver real change. And that is what we are doing.
Independent MP Allegra Spender has been campaigning for tax reform, including to the capital gains tax, since arriving in federal parliament in 2022. But as we just saw, today she tried to slow down the government's legislation. She joins me now. Allegra Spender, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'll try and pronounce it properly this time. What were you trying to achieve today by slowing down the movement of the legislation through the House?
So I think this reform is really important, and I think that I give credit to the government, I give credit to the Treasurer for putting this on the agenda. But the truth is, the Australian population and actually the experts haven't caught up with what is being put forward. There are some real issues with particularly some of the CGT changes, and it needs proper examination to make sure you get it right. Because if you don't get tax reform right, you will not bring people with you. You will not get the right economic outcomes for the country in terms of driving prosperity and innovation and entrepreneurialism. And frankly, you're not going to bring the Australian people with you, and their reform will get pushed back in the future.
We've heard you talking about the benefits of change to this tax for a long time. Who or what changed your mind post the budget that this version of the change is not the one that you were looking for?
So I think firstly, we really need the change. And I want to say we need to see change. And I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that, we need a tax system that better balances the taxes between wages and capital.
Sure, and if I may, that was your position
100%.
Before.
Yeah, and I still support changes to this capital gains tax. But I have concerns with the model that the government has put forward, and there are sort of three significant concerns. One is around businesses and business formation, whether it be smaller businesses or bigger businesses or high growth businesses. That I don't think the tax system, the capital gains tax system of indexation really works for that. There are some issues around the taxation of nominal and real gains and whether it's symmetric. And there's also this question of tax smoothing, sort of income smoothing, which was a different model under the Keating model. And so there are three different issues with what the government's put forward. They could be resolvable, but the truth is they're not going to be resolvable if we try and push it through Parliament in the next 4 weeks, with a 3 week sort of brief Senate inquiry.
All right, so we've heard slightly conflicting messages from the government and from members of the government about how willing they are to listen to some of the issues that have been raised. Today, the Prime Minister, we saw him, he just said, don't expect too much. They also say they are consulting. What is your view on how willing they are to make concessions, to offer carve-outs and to different sectors, not just to tech and start-up industries?
Look, it is, it seems to be they're making a message saying, the feedback I'm getting is that they are consulting genuinely, and that's certainly what I'm getting. But the question then the Prime Minister says, well, look, don't expect big changes. And I think that's really, I think that's not a helpful attitude, because honestly, the government has unveiled the most, in their words, the most substantial tax changes in the country in 25 years, and then saying, well, don't expect much to change. It wasn't able, obviously, to consult significantly before those changes because...
I must say, I have never completely understood that. Why didn't they have time to consult?
Well, I'm not understand, but I assume in the budget processes, they're trying to keep it quiet and actually do it quietly. But the truth is, there are things that we need to get right. And this is about getting it right. When the Ralph Review did the review back in 1999 and recommended the current changes, that was like 12 to 14 months of work there. So my view is that get this right. I think the government is right to put it on the table. CGT should be on the table, but you've got to get it right.
Now, the peak body for small businesses have a very specific change that they want. They want to change the threshold for what a small business is under these changes. They want it to go to include businesses with a turnover of up to $10 million and assets under $12 million. If they expand that threshold in that way, would that solve the issues for you?
I think that would make a significant difference for small businesses, but there will be some businesses that won't be sort of addressed in that. And I think some of those are, for instance, some of it's sort of how does that work? For instance, some of their employees who are early, give up really good jobs to come in and work in an early stage business. So I think that's a really important part. I think that's one that I would definitely support. But I think that there are other elements. And I think there are elements in the share trading space, and there are elements also with other issues in relation to the income smoothing that people are raising and many economists are raising.
Averaging.
Yeah, income averaging, exactly right.
Just a thing on the shares, because that's something that surely you must have looked at when you were bringing forward a white paper, you were getting people, you wanted people to talk to you about CGT. You understood well how CGT would apply to shares. Did you not anticipate it would be part of the reform?
Sure, no, I've always supported that it's a full model if you're going to change CGT. But the point that what I put forward was to say a simple reduction in our current discount from 50%, to in my mind I had put it at 30%. I've since been getting feedback saying, well, look, maybe that's not the right number, maybe it's a bit in the middle. But it wouldn't have changed, had some of the impacts that the government's changes in relation to shares have made into the indexation model. And I think that's the point. This indexation model, we haven't had it since 1999. The young people it's meant to be helping, most of them, were not looking at shares back in 1999. So there is not, certainly in my conversations with a lot of young people, there's a real concern and confusion about what's going on. And that is the other reason to slow this stuff down. Listen to people.
Let me ask you this. It's an example of some of the language that we've heard from people opposed to it. It's a very successful tech entrepreneur in Australia, the one behind a successful data centre company. He says the country is now set to miss out on up to $50 billion in critical infrastructure investment for new data centres to power AI, suggesting that they will all be now foreign-owned because there is no incentive for investors here. Is that a realistic claim, or is that overblown?
Look, I think there are a bunch of overblown claims out there, but I do think that we have to be competitive to be a place to start and grow businesses. And I think that is why, particularly working on how do you get it right for the sort of tech, small business, medium business sector is really, really important. And I think at the moment, without some sort of changes to the current proposal, we won't be as competitive as we have been, and that will mean we will lose some of those businesses offshore.
One of the proposals put forward this week was on this programme from Matt Comyn, the head of the CBA. He said that the change should apply to housing only. Could you reach a position where you would support that as a solution to what's going on?
I think it's one way you could do it is housing only, certainly. And I think there's a really big degree of social licence here. But if you actually do want to reduce some of the, if you want to reduce income tax rates, which is what I want to do, I think we need to cut marginal tax rates at all levels, including the top rate. Then you actually have to get the money from somewhere. And I think that's where you could apply it more broadly, but it's got to be a better system.
We just saw in Jacob Greber's package, the PM claiming that all the benefits from the tax changes would be handed back in income tax. Is that what they're really doing?
Well, they're doing it over the first 4 years, but there's $77 billion in there's years of 6 to 10 effectively that have not been committed. And I've said this to the government, explicitly before they did the budget, saying if you are going to make any tax changes, make commitments about reducing taxes going forward, because that's the confusion I'm getting. And I've been out at markets. We've got about 600 survey results. People are telling me, and young people are telling me, it's like, how does this actually benefit me? I'm trying to get ahead. If the government said, okay, we're going to reduce the top marginal tax rate, in year 5, and then we're going to reduce it further here. If they made commitments that this money was going to go back, it's not going to go to more government spending, they would have greater social licence.
Let me just take you to something that the Secretary of Treasury, again, who we saw in the previous package, she offered up some figures today that said that with the CGT changes and the tax offset that is on offer, it will leave 90% of people under 30 better off. Isn't that exactly the rebalancing that you were looking for when you were discussing intergenerational inequity?
Absolutely. I do want to see that rebalancing. I think it is really important. But I think there are some real challenges with what the government has put forward. I think they need to be worked out. I don't think they're insurmountable, but you do need to get it right. And rushing this through Parliament is not the way to build social licence. It's not the way to get the reform right, and it's not the way to deal with those issues.
Yes, no. Can you slow them down?
We will, look, I don't know, I can't force them to slow it down in the House, but I think this is the time for them to do it. It's in their interest, because rushed reform that doesn't have social licence is not going to deliver the environment, the economic benefits, but also the social licence for future reforms, which is what this country needs.
Allegra Spender, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.